Hey, what's up, house groups? Glad to be back for week 2 of our fall house groups session. This last Sunday, Mike kicked off a new series called Paper Walls, and he talked about the paper wall of anxiety in our lives, and really just like how ingrained fear and anxiety are as motivators and inhibitors in our culture, which both directly and indirectly affects our personal lives too. Like we seem to be just surrounded by worry and anxiety and fear. Like every time I turn on the TV now, it's that season again where I'm just hit over and over again by some political ad saying like Bobby Newport is a bad guy. He is so scary. Don't vote for him. I'm way better. I endorse this message. Like fear and anxiety, they're such powerful motivators, and it's so easy to get in our own heads about what can and might happen. Like Mike said on Sunday, it's really easy to dress up our fears about what might happen like they're certainties, which is a huge inhibitor in our lives because it keeps us stuck. Like it keeps us from moving. Like God, He created us to continuously grow and learn and develop physically, mentally, and spiritually for our entire lives. Like we are created to be in motion towards the life and person that God created us to be, which sounds great, right? But then fear and anxiety enter the picture, and we start to worry about what might and what could be, and we convince ourselves that it will happen. And these paper walls, they just keep us from becoming who God created us to be, because even though like we know that they're barriers to a more fulfilled life, we convince ourselves that we'll never be able to break through. Like our paper walls, they end up being like banners at a Pee Wee football game.
Last week, we showed you Pee Wee football players from Wallkill, New York, taking on their toughest opponent yet, the team's own banner. Well, it was vinyl, remember, not paper. Well, correspondent Steve Hartman caught up with the Mighty Mites, who shared newfound words of wisdom.
It was weird how my team couldn't even get past it. It was tough. It was tougher than us.
Now, if this isn't a good metaphor for life sometimes, I don't know what is. But here's the thing. These 9-year-old kids are secret theological wizards because they're right. It was just weird how we couldn't get past it. That thing was tougher than us. And one of the biggest lies that the devil wants us to believe is that we can break through these walls on our own. That we should figure it out because it's either not that big of a deal or like, why would we bother the Lord with silly things like our deep-seated fears and anxieties, right? Like, please tell me I'm not the only one who falls for this. It is so easy. Like Joshua in chapter 1 that Mike talked about. Like, it's so easy to convince ourselves that our worries of what might happen are more true than what God says is true. Like, we trust ourselves more than God. We cling to control in every situation because we believe deep down that we understand ourselves and our situations better than God does. Like, I've got it. I'll figure it out. I can do this. And then we face plant into a paper wall like a Pee Wee football team, and then we blame God as if He tripped us on the way. And I think that just reveals a lot more about us than we care to admit. Like maybe we're a little more controlling than we thought we were. And the danger in living this way is that it turns our relationship with God into something transactional. Like all of a sudden, when things don't go according to our own plans, we come to God and we say something like, what the heck, Lord? Come on. Like we might even start trying to live in an extra spiritual way, like by going to church every week and praying when we think about it, or reading the verse of the day on the Bible app, or maybe even joining a house group, like all because we thought that by doing those things, it's going to just make us more inherently holy. And so we check all these boxes like check, 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 and then we start using that as ammo with God because our relationship has become more transactional. And then we say things like, oh, come on, man, like I'm doing all the right stuff for you. Why aren't you doing something for me? You're not holding up your end of the deal. But I think what this reveals in us is that we want God to change our circumstances, but we don't really want Him to change us. Mike, he said that on Sunday, and it hit me like a ton of bricks, because how often am I sitting here just checking off every religious box that I can think of, and then I still wonder why things aren't going the way that I want? And I think it's because, like, rather than developing a deeper relationship with God, I'm just using these spiritual practices to gain collateral with God, and it just doesn't work like that. That's not the love that God talks about. That's not the love Jesus expressed for us. That really, it isn't a relationship worth giving your life to. Like a relationship worth giving your life to is one that casts out all fear and anxiety, one that breaks down the walls on our behalf so that we can continue taking steps forward and becoming who God created us to be. Again, we were never created to go through life figuring everything out on our own. In fact, you want to know what happens when we do that? We get stressed and worried and scared about situations that we imagined but we believe are true. Like anxiety, it's a future-based emotion that isn't based on reality, and it's a paper wall that God, he just rips up over and over again in Scripture. Like it's not a big deal to him. You just have to take a step forward and trust that those promises God makes in Scripture are promises that he keeps for you too. On Sunday, Mike, he challenged us to take 3 steps when it comes to handing over control to God and breaking through the paper wall of fear and anxiety. And they're this. The first one is participate in the promise. Like God, he wants us to participate, but it does require us to actually take a step. And so don't quit before it's over. Don't give up because you've settled for believing what isn't even true. And the second thing he said was commit to God's commands. Not so that you can just tell him you're doing everything right and wonder why he's not giving you everything that you want, but so that you can actually develop a relationship with God and get closer and closer to him. And lastly, the third thing was live like you're loved. Like the more that we let these paper walls keep us from moving forward, the more that we start to believe the lies that our faults and our inadequacies are what define us. But let me just tell you, like right here and right now, that simply isn't true. Fear cannot live where love lives. And if you would all commit today to giving up this tight grip of control over our own lives, like we'd be able to more fully understand and accept the love of God who cares about you more than you can ever imagine. So let's take that first step today.